In Formula One, rivalries aren't just about racing, they're nuclear arms races fought on asphalt. This is a place where carbon fibre shatters like broken dreams, and egos are as oversized as rear wings. The history of Formula One is littered with rivalries so explosive they've turned teammates into enemies, transformed friends into bitter foes, and burned themselves into the very DNA of the sport. These are the most epic rivalries that didn't just shape F1 history, they became F1 legend.
That was mega!
Alain Prost versus Ayrton Senna, the philosophers of war. If Shakespeare had written Formula One scripts, Prost versus Senna would have been his Hamlet. High drama, betrayal, existential clashes of philosophy, and oh yes, lots of violence at the climax. It began in 1988, when Senna joined McLaren to partner Alain Prost. On paper, dream team. In reality, the worst-kept powder keg in motorsport. Prost was the professor, clinical, methodical, the kind of driver who calculated risk to the millimetre. He was the surgeon. Senna was the priest, but a fire and brimstone one. He didn't race to win. He raced like God himself had put him on earth to prove a divine point. To Prost, that was reckless. To Senna, Prost's calculated style was cowardice. Statistically, Senna had the upper hand in qualifying, often blowing Prost out of the water. But the numbers are just the footnotes. The real rivalry played out in glares across the garage, passive-aggressive press conferences, and of course, crashes. Suzuka became their personal war zone, with collisions in both 1989 and 1990 shaping the championships. To this day, documentaries, books, and endless YouTube essays dissect the rivalry. Prost and Senna weren't just two greats. They were two philosophers trying to define what Formula One meant. And spoiler alert, neither won that argument. The sport did. Up next, we're going to unpack a lifetime of brutal F1 rivalries in a matter of minutes. So don't go anywhere. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more legendary Formula One stories, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Michael Schumacher versus Damon Hill. Controversy at full throttle. When Michael Schumacher rose to prominence in the mid-1990s, his biggest obstacle was Damon Hill, the man carrying the Williams team's hopes after Ayrton Senna's tragic death. Schumacher's approach to racing was relentless, strategic, and often controversial. Hill was more methodical, carrying both the pressure of living up to his father Graham Hill's legacy and the burden of proving himself worthy of his seat. The 1994 season was a cauldron of tension. It ended in one of the sport's most infamous moments at Adelaide. Schumacher's suspicious collision with Hill secured him the championship and cemented his reputation as a ruthless competitor. In 1995, Schumacher and Benetton dominated, leaving Hill to chase from behind. But the Brit struck back in 1996, winning the championship in convincing fashion, only to lose his drive at Williams immediately afterward. Their rivalry tapered off as Schumacher moved to Ferrari and Hill to smaller teams, but occasional sparks, like Hill nearly winning in an Arrows at Hungary in 1997, reminded everyone of the intensity they once shared. This rivalry was less about mutual hatred and more about high-stakes chess, albeit chess where the pieces could crash at 200 miles per hour. Mark Webber versus Sebastian Vettel, the teammate Cold War. Teammate rivalries are like family feuds, toxic, inevitable, and visible to literally everyone in the paddock. But Webber versus Vettel at Red Bull? That was nuclear winter. Webber, the gritty Aussie veteran, was the guy who'd fought tooth and nail for his career. Vettel was the wunderkind, a golden boy with raw pace that bent physics to his will. For a while they coexisted, until they didn't. 2010 Turkey. They crash fighting for the lead. Cue headlines, cue sniping, cue management panic. Then came the breaking point. Malaysia 2013. Multi-21. Webber ahead. Team orders say, hold position. Vettel ignores it, overtakes him anyway and wins. Webber's face after the race? Pure disgust. You could practically hear him thinking, screw this, I'm done. By the end of the season he was, gone to endurance racing. Vettel went on to win 4 titles. But for many fans it was Webber, stubborn, sharp, unyielding, who became the people's champion of that era, because he never accepted being Red Bull's number 2. James Hunt versus Niki Lauda. Rivals, friends, legends. You know this one because Hollywood made a movie out of it. But even before Rush, Hunt versus Lauda was the ultimate paradox. Fierce rivals on track, unlikely friends off it. 1976 was the season of chaos. Lauda, dominant in his Ferrari, looked unstoppable until his horrifying Nürburgring crash. Most men would have retired. Lauda came back 6 weeks later, bandages still on his head. Hunt, meanwhile, clawed back points, his playboy charm masking a ferocious competitive drive. The championship came down to Japan. Torrential rain. Lauda, shaken by the danger, retired after a couple laps. Hunt pressed on, taking just enough points to win the title by 1. And here's the kicker. They respected each other more for it. No endless sniping, no bitter lawsuits. Hunt and Lauda showed that rivalry and respect aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes they make each other immortal. Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton, the modern-day clash of titans. If Prost versus Senna was the defining rivalry of the late 80s, Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton has been the modern era's epic saga. Hamilton, the record 7-time world champion and most statistically successful driver in F1 history with over 100 wins, built his empire on precision, consistency and a near-perfect command of racecraft. Verstappen, the fearless Dutchman, came charging into the sport with raw aggression and the belief that no corner, no matter how tight, was off-limits. Their tensions simmered for years, but erupted fully in 2021. That season became one of the most dramatic in history, a relentless duel of wins, crashes, and controversial steward decisions. It all came down to the final lap of the final race in Abu Dhabi, where Verstappen's daring move and the race director's contentious call flipped the championship in his favour. The aftermath divided fans and pundits alike, sparking debates that still rage today. Regardless of which side you're on, the season was a reminder that F1 thrives when 2 titans push each other to, and sometimes past, the limits. Michael Schumacher versus Mika Häkkinen, rivals with respect. Among all the heated feuds in F1, the Schumacher-Häkkinen rivalry stands out for its sportsmanship. These 2 giants pushed each other mercilessly on track, but maintained a genuine respect of it. Their history stretched back to Formula 3, but it was the late 1990s in F1 where the rivalry reached its peak. In 1998, Häkkinen snatched the title after Schumacher stalled on the grid in the season finale. In 1999, Schumacher's season was interrupted by a broken leg, giving Häkkinen the space to secure a 2nd consecutive championship. By 2000, the tide turned. Schumacher, now fully synced with Ferrari, finally beat Häkkinen in a nail-biting Suzuka showdown. It marked the start of Ferrari's era of dominance, while Häkkinen retired the following year. This rivalry remains a testament to the fact that you don't have to despise your opponent to compete at the highest level. But it certainly helps to have someone of equal caliber to bring out your best. Nigel Mansell versus Ayrton Senna. Fire versus ice. Now let's talk about the ultimate F1 showdown. If there's one rivalry that could match the intensity of Senna-Prost, it's Nigel Mansell versus Ayrton Senna. These 2 racing legends take the #1 spot on our list for the most epic rivalry. Mansell was not the most naturally gifted driver on the grid, but what he lacked in finesse, he made up for in sheer willpower. Senna, already a master of precision and mental warfare, found in Mansell an opponent who simply refused to be intimidated. Their clashes were personal. The 1987 Belgian Grand Prix saw them collide, and tensions flared to the point where physical confrontation wasn't off the table. Senna himself once recalled Mansell grabbing him by the throat in anger. Their battles on track were equally ferocious, none more famous than the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona, where they raced side by side down the main straight at over 300 kilometers per hour in a moment burned into F1 history. Mansell eventually won the 1992 championship, but their rivalry left behind a rich legacy of drama, danger, and unforgettable racing. From the calculated warfare of Prost versus Senna to the flat-out battles between Hamilton and Verstappen, Formula One has been shaped by its rivalries. They've produced controversy, brilliance, and moments that will be replayed for decades. If F1 history teaches us anything, it's that the fight never ends. The names just change. As we reflect on these legendary battles, one question remains. What's next? Who's going to be the next pair of drivers to etch their names into the records of F1 history? And what fresh rivalries could emerge from the ashes of past battles? Because in Formula One, there will always be another rivalry. And when two forces collide, the sport ignites in ways that remind the world why these rivalries are its beating heart.